Today on All Sports Central, we're going to be going over another schedule preview, and this one's going to be over the Ole Miss Rebels, which, quite honestly, was a team that disappointed in the 2019 season, ended up only getting 4 wins, and I do understand that they had a ton of losses before the 2019 season, but nonetheless, in this video, we're going to be going over a few players this team will be returning, who they're going to be losing, and also we're going to be going over their schedule for the first time this offseason. Once again, they went 4-8 in 2019, and as for their game since November, they lost to Auburn 14-20. So overall, they kept it close on the road, not all that bad of a loss. They did beat up New Mexico State 41-3. Then they lost to LSU 37-58. But you got to consider, towards the end of the season, to put up 37 on LSU, that's actually pretty good, even though if you allowed 58 to them. And then they lost to Mississippi State on the road 20-21 to finish off the season in a pretty controversial ending, I guess we could say. Nonetheless, trend for the season for Ole Miss, 3-5 between September and October, and 1-3 from November to the postseason. So overall, it was a pretty inconsistent season for Ole Miss, and it'll be interesting to see how they do in 2020. They've got actually a lot of talent returning. They returned both their top quarterbacks, Corral and Plumlee. John Rice Plumlee actually led the team in rushing yards as well. He had over 1,000 yards rushing, as well as 910 yards passing with 4 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. So overall, he wasn't all that great of a passer with a 4-3 touchdown interception ratio. To put up over 1,000 yards rushing though as well, it's very, very impressive. And then you got Matt Corral, who put up over 1,300 yards of passing, as well as 6 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. So it'll be interesting to see which one of these quarterbacks mainly takes over in the 2020 season. Of course, both of them put up a lot of good stats. They returned their top running back in Jerion Ely, which he had nearly 900 yards of rushing as well as 7 touchdowns. But they do lose their second running back in Scotty Phillips, which he had just over 600 yards and 6 touchdowns. They returned their top wide receiver, Elijah Moore, which is huge. He had nearly 900 yards as well as 6 touchdowns. So they do lose their second running back, of course, but I mean, returning your top running back as well as all of your other wide receivers, that's going to be huge for this team, especially returning their quarterbacks. This offense has a ton of potential going into 2020, in my opinion, and I do understand that they weren't as good here this year, but I think that this could be an Ole Miss team that could surprise some people, especially on the offensive side. As well as the defensive side, they also lose 2 tight ends and one right tackle on the offense, which really isn't all that bad. But on defense, they lose 3 defensive linemen, 1 linebacker, and 2 in the secondary. So there are there are 6 losses, or 6 starters that they're losing, is what I should say, on the defense. That includes 3 on the defensive line. So this defensive line is going to be they could struggle a little bit here this upcoming season, as you lose when you lose 3 starting defensive linemen. That's going to be tough to make up. But 1 linebacker, 2 in the secondary, also a couple of tough losses there. But yeah, once again, the offense should improve a ton going into next season. I think that'll be a huge bright point for this team. However, the defense is going to be the main factor whether this team does well or not. If the defense improves, if they somehow are able to replace the players that they lost, I think that this Ole Miss team could very, very potentially get to 6, 7, maybe even 8 wins this season. But nonetheless, I mean, it's still really early to tell. But this offense, looking at who they're losing and who they're returning, really, I think this offense has a ton of potential to do some pretty crazy things this upcoming season. Looking at their schedule for the first time, you start off the season against Baylor in a neutral location. I think that's in the Houston NRG Stadium. And then it's Southeast Missouri the next week, and then Auburn and LSU to follow. So this September is actually really difficult for Ole Miss, facing 3 teams which finished off within the top 15. So with all that being said, for Ole Miss, I mean, you got to come out on fire if you're going to have a good season. And certainly for the SEC, their schedules are kind of funky this season. The first week of the season actually has a more difficult opponent, followed by a non-conference team. But of course for Ole Miss it's a little bit different because you got your easier games split up among the weeks. Of course, you got Southeast Missouri being one of them on September 12th, and then UConn towards the end of October on the 24th, and then Georgia Southern as the second to last week of the regular season. So this is a really wacky schedule for Ole Miss compared to most seasons, and so that could make a difference as to how Ole Miss does this season. But once again, those first 5 weeks are going to be brutal for Ole Miss. With Baylor, of course. I mean, Baylor's not going to be as good next year, I don't think. But that's still going to be a tough game. Auburn then, as well as LSU on the road, and then Alabama at home too, and then Florida again in a couple weeks. So really, honestly, I think the part where Ole Miss is going to thrive would be in the second half of the season, when really the only difficult opponent will be Florida. And also, I mean, Texas A&M could be a difficult opponent as well. But looking at the strength of schedule from the first half to the second half, it certainly looks like Ole Miss is going to have a much easier second half of the season. So even if Ole Miss starts off, let's say 1-5, they still have a ton of potential to go 7-5, to be honest with you. But nonetheless, here's kind of what I'm expecting at first sight. I'm going to give you 3 guaranteed wins. Those are going to be Southeast Missouri, UConn, and Georgia Southern. And then 1 projected loss, which is going to be LSU on the road on September 26th. I just don't see that one happening, especially after playing 2 pretty tough teams within your first 3 weeks of the regular season. Then having to travel on the road to LSU, I don't really like that matchup there. But nonetheless, I do think that Ole Miss is going to improve next season. I don't think that they're going to go 4-8 again. I can easily see this Ole Miss team making a bowl game next season. Actually, I think they're going to go between 5-7 and 7-5 right now, which quite honestly, it doesn't sound very good. But for this Ole Miss team, which has struggled quite a bit in the last couple of seasons, 5-7 to 7-5 is actually pretty good. I think this team, though, once again, if you can start off quick, possibly get 4 wins in that first 6, I think that Ole Miss definitely has potential to possibly get 8 wins this season, no doubt about it. But yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how Ole Miss does. This is a team in the SEC that I'm really interested in seeing how they do, especially with, once again, returning both your quarterbacks, and also to see which quarterback comes out on top as well. I mean, you can't go with 2 quarterbacks for 2 years straight. I mean, it's going to be tough to do that. And also, I mean, their passing game is good, with just over 2,100 yards total for passing offense. But overall, I mean, that's not all that great. And I think for Ole Miss, if they're going to be good next season, they got to get that passing game going as well. But nonetheless, let me know your early thoughts on Ole Miss in the comments below. I do understand that it is early February right now, and we'll have more schedule previews coming out for you within the days, within the weeks. So yeah, stay tuned for those. Thank you guys all for watching, though. Once again, stay tuned for more from All Sports Central, and I will see you all later.